Let me tell you, you never really know what a promise is worth until you find yourself fighting to keep it. I bought this abandoned lake mansion. Yeah, that's right, a real crumbling behemoth, tucked away behind the trees, with more broken dreams than working light bulbs, because I told my daughter I'd build her a place to heal, a place just for us. So when I rolled up that gravel drive for the first time, all I saw was potential, not the peeling paint or the sagging porch, not even the silence that pressed in from the woods, thick and full of memory. It was supposed to be mine, a chance to start over, to keep a promise I'd whispered in a hospital room that smelled like bleach and second chances. But you know what they say about best-laid plans. The morning after I started clearing brush, I heard heavy engines before I saw them. Bulldozers, demolition crews. And standing there like she owned the sky was the HOA president herself, all pristine white pantsuit, and the kind of sunglasses you wear when you think rules don't apply to you. She handed me a bill, $112,000 in supposed back fees, told me my deed meant nothing, and that the house was coming down with or without my say-so. Yeah, that happened. She had local cops in her back pocket, fake documents stamped by the right hands, and a smile that said she was used to getting her way. But here's the thing. Some people see a fight and run the other way. I see a fight and dig in. This woman had no idea that her whole little fiefdom was built on quicksand. Because if there's one thing I know, besides how to swing a hammer and read a blueprint, it's how to spot a lie when it's right in front of me. I won't lie, those first days were rough. The demolition crew parked their machines right on my lawn, ripped apart my porch, and dared me to do something about it. The foreman barely glanced at my deed. Not my monkeys, not my circus, he shrugged. And that's the moment I knew I was on my own. No lawyer in town wanted to touch it, especially not when the HOA president's brother-in-law ran code enforcement. The judge owed her a favor, and the whole board was stacked with her cronies. My clean deed, worth less than the coffee stain on her designer portfolio. But then, like something out of a small-town noir, I met Pete. Old-timer, grease under his nails, tinkering with an engine that hadn't run right since Nixon. He'd seen it all. He told me about the last guy Charlene, that Ice Queen president, ran out of town over mailbox colors and grass length. And then, when he saw I wasn't going anywhere, he handed me an accordion file, original documents from before Charlene rewrote the rules to suit herself. Don't say where you got it, he said, eyes darting up and down the street. And then he walked away. What I found buried in those dusty papers was my first real shot. Turns out, HOA fines expire after 10 years if not collected, and almost all that debt Charlene was waving at me was just smoke. Even better, I found out, after a long, eye-watering day in the county records office, that the HOA had stopped filing the legal paperwork to exist as a corporation back in 2005. For nearly 2 decades, they'd just pretended to be in charge, collecting money, handing out fines, threatening people, without a shred of real legal standing. I went straight to a new lawyer, a city guy who didn't care who ran the garden club. He filed an emergency injunction to stop the demolition and a quiet title action to make my ownership unbreakable. I started knocking on doors, talking to anyone willing to meet my eyes. A lot of folks slammed doors or looked the other way, but Pete came around. Then Carl, whose wife needed a wheelchair ramp the HOA hated, and David, whose life was being drained by a fight over a dying tree. One by one, they agreed to stand with me. Charlene tried everything. She had me arrested, handcuffed on my own property, my face pressed against the side of my old Ford while she watched with that smug, frozen smile. She got a judge to bar me from entering my own house. She sent out emails claiming I was a fraud, that my daughter hadn't really died, that I was some failed developer out to wreck the neighborhood. It stung. God, it stung, but it didn't break me. If anything, it made me colder, more focused. A promise is a promise. The real turning point? I found a loophole in the old bylaws, a rule that said if you got 10% of homeowners to sign a petition, you could call a special meeting to replace the whole board. 20 signatures. It wasn't easy, people were scared. But every person who signed told me their own story. Bird feeders fined because of squirrels, a swing set ripped out because it was plastic instead of wood, endless threats and fees and fear. By the end, I had more than enough signatures. The night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Charlene tried to dismiss me, to laugh it all off, but I had a projector and the county's official records. I showed everyone the proof. The HOA was dissolved. The debts were bogus. The whole thing was a house of cards. You could feel the mood shift, see it on faces in the crowd. The realization that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to be afraid anymore. And then I dropped my final card. I'd bought up the adjacent lots, including the land with the pump house that provided water to every single home. The easement ran right through my property. I had the power to shut it all down. That night, the board lost the room. Charlene screamed for order, but nobody was listening. Neighbors were on their feet, waving their own fine notices, demanding answers. I packed up and left, let the fire burn. By the next morning, the security guards and the cameras were gone. The demolition crew vanished. For the first time since I'd arrived, the property was quiet. Charlene wasn't done. In one final fit of desperation, she and her cronies tried to break into the pump house. Caught on my motion camera, in glorious infrared, faces clear as day. I called the sheriff. This time, justice came with flashing blue lights and handcuffs. Hers, not mine. And as she sat in the back of the squad car, all that arrogance draining away, the news crew rolled up, cameras flashing. It was over. What happened next? Well, you know how these stories go. The vice president and the rest of the board resigned before lunch. Records surfaced, thanks to a nervous secretary, showing just how deep the fraud ran. People who'd been fined into bankruptcy started getting checks back. The old HOA was dissolved for good, its assets frozen, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood breathed easy. But my battle wasn't for headlines or revenge. It was for a promise. Every morning after that, I was out with a shovel, clearing the rubble. Pete showed up first, then Carl, then others, folks who used to avoid me, now coming to help rebuild what Charlene tried to tear down. We fixed the porch, replaced the wiring, painted every last board. I built a dock out over the water, just like Jesse wanted. And on the final post, I screwed in a little plaque, Jesse's Reach. People still ask how I won. It wasn't the lawyer or the documents, or even the threat of shutting off the water. It was community, real people, finally standing up together, tired of being bullied. And it was the promise I made to my daughter, the one I refused to break, no matter how hard they pushed. Now, here's the part where I turn it over to you, because you know what? This stuff happens everywhere. So tell me, was I right to fight? Did justice get served? Or did I just get lucky? Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've got your own battle with a crooked HOA or a power-hungry board, well, don't give up. Sometimes, the only thing standing between you and the people who think they can take what's yours is the promise you refuse to break.